This is one of those videos that people have been waiting for a while. We're here to talk today about my new favorite database provider, backend, sync engine, set of libraries, and so much more. Of course, we're talking about Convex, the database that I migrated to kind of twice at this point, and all the reasons that I have slowly fallen in love with it. For a little bit of context before we dive in, Convex is a different way of thinking about your structure of your applications. The copy here used to say the other half of your React apps because it's everything other than the front end side, and it does a pretty good job of all of it. But I've always been pretty skeptical of what Convex was doing. When I first got to play around with it and hung out at their office all the way back in 2021, I had pretty immediately concluded that this just wasn't for me, that it was a solution for toy apps and beginners to throw together something quickly. I might not have been super wrong about it at that point in time because it was still very early. But holding on to that take for as long as I did is something that I legitimately regret. I want to tell you guys all about how wrong my takes were, how I actually started to consider Convex more seriously, and the path that led me to falling in love with it so deeply that it is now the solution that we use for all of T3 chat, as well as the majority of things we have built since then. Convex has made me feel so much better about how I build, what I build, and the experiences I provide for my users. And I'm very lucky to call them a sponsor of the channel. In fact, that's a key part of the story. All of that said, I want this video to be as unbiased as possible, so Convex will not be sponsoring it. I still have to pay my team. My editor needs to get a salary, So quick word from whoever else we have sponsor instead, and then we'll dive in to all the things Convex has entirely changed about how I write code. AI is really good at coding, as long as it has the context that it needs. If your context is small because your code base is small, then it probably works really well. But if you're working in a giant code base with tons of code all over, AI can't even find the right file, much less make changes to it. Unless you're using today's sponsor, Augment Code. These guys are the kings of context. They handle giant code bases better than any tool I've used, and I still use them for that reason. I keep VS Code open in a bunch of other big projects because if I need to find something out about them, it's still the best way to do it. But this is the React code base. This code base is massive. If I ask it, how is use effect actually implemented? We will, in literal seconds, get a response that tells us in the context of this giant code base what's going on. Here, it's already happened. And again, that's like hundreds of thousands of lines of code that it went through to do that. As on the actual answer, it's 593,962 lines of code in this code base. It's absurd. And despite that, it was able to find the exact details of how the React Fiber hook works and give me all this information, as well as the ability to jump straight to the file and the section that it's talking about. If you have questions about your code base, I've yet to find anything better than Augment at finding it, no matter how deep in your gigantic code base it is. If that's all they did, it'd be worth it, but they do a hell of a lot more. In fact, they won SWE Bench, the hardest benchmark for doing AI agentic code work. The level of crushing they did here is nuts, and they actually open sourced all the details of how they did it too, which is really cool. Theoretically, other companies can copy them. None quite have pulled it off yet, though. Their context engine is the key. Its ability to handle millions upon millions of tokens in context and find the right thing. I actually don't know how they did it, but what they did is magical, and you'll feel the difference when you try it. And just on a personal note, considering how few times I've mentioned Augment Code, they come up more than almost any other sponsor. People seem to really like them. If you want to see what we all see, check them out today at soydev.link/augment. This is my journey with Convex. Let's start with where this all started. If I recall, this would have been probably December 2021. It might have been a little bit later. There was a meetup at their office with two people speaking that I was really excited to chat with and hang out with. At this point in time, I didn't know anything about Convex really at all. All I knew is that they were the office hosting this awesome talk that I was really excited about. Well, talks. It was Ryan Carniato, the creator of Solid, and Jared Sumner, hopefully I got that spelling right, creator of Bun. And this was Jared's first talk, if I recall, ever. And Ryan Carniato's was another talk in a lot of parts I'd seen, but I was just so excited to see both of them nerding out about their stuff. I had yet to meet Ryan in person. This was my first time ever hanging out with him. It was a really, really good time. That said, around the same time, another big thing had happened in my life. T3 Stack has started blowing up. And honestly, if I get the order of events here right, this would be first. And if this would have been November. So in November of 2021, I coined the T3 stack. I already had owned the domain t3.gg because despite what others say, the 3 stands for the 3 letters after the T in my name. I was inspired by a friend 3V, whose name was Werner V something. And since W is double V in German, it was double V were his initials, which is 3 Vs. So he would go by 3V. And I loved his domain. I was so jealous. And it subconsciously led to me getting t3.gg when I saw it was available. It took me a year to realize I was just copying 3V. Regardless, T3 is meant to be my brand. It's just gone way further since. I don't fault anyone who thinks it stands for Tailwind, TypeScript, and the reason I'm bringing it up, TRPC. If you think T3 stands for these 3 Ts, you are wrong. But I won't be too mad at you for it because it made logical sense. The reason that I created the T3 stack is because I grew up in the LAMP era. I then went to college in the MEAN era. I watched it become the MERN era. I was used to these stacks that represented moments in time and cultures and so much more. I could almost measure my development journey through these random abbreviations. And I missed that. And I felt like I was seeing a really cool opportunity. I had written a proposal for my own solution for doing backend code in my front-end apps. I wrote this proposal 4 years ago. Well, give me the exact date if I hover. Yeah, this was July of 2021. This was right as I was starting to build what became ping.gg, the video call app. And I was getting annoyed about having to write an endpoint and then call it with React Query and not know about the shape of things. I had come fresh out of Twitch where we were using GraphQL for everything and I was using CodeGen to get reliable type definitions. And I missed that all so dearly. My stack at the time was React, Vite, and React Query for all the data fetching, and my endpoints would be defined using the Vercel/API directory to host random TypeScript backend functions. And I had started moving to Next, not for anything that Next does, other than its characteristics of letting you put an API directory in your Next app, and it would bundle those all into one package for you so that it wouldn't be as annoying to deploy. I moved to Next to make deployment easier, not for Next itself. As silly as that sounds, that was my journey. But I was getting more and more tired of how I would get my data to my app. I've spent way too much time thinking about all the different ways to get my data to my app and make sure the data is the right shape and behaves how it's supposed to. And this is the proposal that I had written. In your React code, if you needed some data from your backend, you would write use backend, give it a unique key, do whatever you need to for the backend code. In this case, I'm assuming get profile from DB is a function hitting probably Prisma at the time. I was a big Prisma fan. You return the data, prefetch true. And now in this TypeScript code, we can infer what data's type is because we have it right here. It's just whatever is returned there. So during dev, we get the best in class experience where our front end has the type definitions from backend because we're just writing the backend code right there. And then at compile time, it would split this into 2 files. It would create in the example page function a hot swapped out use query call that would call React Query, use the same key, fetch to this generated endpoint that we have now defined, handle turning it into JSON, return you the data, and you would be able to pass initial data through the get server-side props function that would also auto-generate to fetch this data, call the function or hit the endpoint, and then have it there on server render if you want to. And then I would define a generated endpoint that uses whatever the name you put for the key is, that would actually just call the function and return it. This was meant to be a simple sketch of a way to write my backend code way more simply, and as a result, get better type safety, get better composability and reliability, and also with the get server-side prop stuff being built in, better performance characteristics too. I was really excited about this proposal, so much so that when I was browsing around Twitter back when I had no followers, and this is actually even further back, we got to move these down. We are now in July of 2021. This journey is crazy. I was really hyped on my use backend proposal, and then I saw Tanner Lindsley, who's the creator of React Query, doing a Twitter space. I joined. We chatted a whole bunch about whatever. And reminder, I had like 200 followers max at this point in time. I'd never posted a video. I wasn't a creator. I was just a random dev starting to use Twitter more, going insane during COVID because I wanted to nerd out so fucking bad. I lost my lunch and dinner convos with my nerdy coworkers, and I just wanted to talk about the things I found interesting in tech and about these crazy proposals I was writing, all this other stuff going on. and I didn't have a place to. So I got really into Twitter Spaces to talk about all this stuff. So I joined Tanner's Space, and after we chatted about a bunch of other things, there's a little time left. I asked him what he thought of my proposal. He was driving. That's when he would host his spaces, just when he was driving around to and from work usually. So I couldn't show him the proposal, but I described it to him and I linked it so others could go look at it. After I asked him about it, his response was very, very important for everyone currently hanging out being here in the first place. Tanner responded roughly with, "That sounds pretty cool. I know two similar things that are also building on React Query. I think they're called Blitz and TRCP or something." Then he specified that he hadn't had a chance to look into them yet, but he really enjoyed talking with me about new technologies. So he very politely requested, as he put it, he was going to give me homework. He asked me to go look into them and come back during his next Twitter space to talk all about what I discovered to help him better understand what these are and what they do. So I did. Well, actually what happened is I got distracted with Astro. I went and built my site from scratch in Astro. I thought it would take me a few days. It took me like an hour. Fell in love with Astro, shipped that, was done at like 8 p.m. And I like had reserved this whole weekend to just hack on things. And I finished it way earlier than expected. So I said, you know what? I'll go check out these Blitz and TRPC things finally. So I actually started with TRPC. And when I went to the homepage, I was like, what's the syntax? There's so much going on here that I don't understand. Let me just look at how I get started with it. So I tried setting it up myself from scratch, which was very, very rough at the time. Didn't get very far. Said, you know what? This one's probably not for me. I'll go check out the other thing he mentioned. So I went and checked out Blitz.js. Blitz was the missing full stack toolkit for Next. I was immediately like, oh, this is exactly what I want, isn't it? Started looking in. At the time, Blitz was in the process of forking Next.js to build a new all-in-one framework, much more inspired by things like Rails or Laravel to bring you everything you need, from auth to the database and ORM, to the pipelines to get data to the client from the server and vice versa. They wanted to do everything for you. And they did. And they did it with a lot of opinions and not a whole lot of modularity. And it was basically impossible to incrementally adopt because it was a new way of building an app from scratch. So I saw it. I saw what the patterns enabled, but I didn't like how much it took from me. It took a lot of control away from me. And you'll notice this is a theme. Remember me not liking this for that reason. I didn't want a solution that prescribed everything to me. I did not want Rails. I wanted what I was familiar with from the past. I wanted the LAMP stack again. I wanted the mean or the MERN stack and all of these different things. I wanted what I was familiar with. The idea of modular tools where you could swap one out for another when it made sense. And Blitz was not modular at all at the time. So I realized what my options were. I could go this very monolithic way with a lot of opinions that I wouldn't necessarily agree with that would take over my app. Or I could man up and get through the TRPC onboarding. So I did. I started rewriting things in TRPC in my code base. And I fell in love almost immediately. Once I had it working, it clicked. And once it clicked, I was all in. And people didn't get it. I sounded insane when I would explain it to people. It's like, you just write the function in the back end, and then you call it in the front end. And if I change it on the back end, the front end sees the change immediately. It sounded like I was promising Firebase, but TypeScript, and it made no sense. People didn't get it. I then proposed it to a friend, Jacob Evans, who's possibly even hanging out right now. He is another really prolific TypeScript dev, contributor into a lot of different open source stuff. And he didn't get it either. So I took one of his open source projects and rewrote it from scratch using my tech that I was using now, including Tailwind, Next.js, TypeScript, and most importantly, TRPC. And I rewrote his like 8,000 line Firebase shit show in a super simple 500 line of code TRPC OG T3 stack code base. And when he saw it, he was immediately blown away. And I realized I couldn't explain this to people by just telling them how cool it was. I had to show them code. And that's when the T3 stack started. And more importantly, that was when my YouTube channel started. This video was posted November 30th, 2021. I made this video specifically because I wanted to show people how cool the stack was. And it wasn't even originally a video. I decided to do a stream where I would write code for the first time ever in my life. Actually, I had streamed myself making games for a contest when I was like 17. So 10 years prior, I'd done one single stream writing code, but didn't consider myself a code streamer at all. I streamed a little bit, mostly games and chats, but I'd never done a code stream before. I did this because I wanted to show the people I was talking to, the small group of people hanging out in these Twitter spaces, what my stack looked like. It now has 285,000 plays. I wasn't even recording a video. I was just nerding out about the things that I like building and how I like to build with them. And you can see from like OG Theo hair just how far things have come since then. Oh God, my skin. I'm so thankful I did Accutane. Anyways, the point I'm making here is that I wanted to show how powerful this modular set of tools was. I coined it the T3 stack, and here we all are today. Like, this channel wouldn't exist if it wasn't for this journey and all of these pieces. This is way more in depth than I need to go because we haven't even mentioned Convex for real yet. But the reminder, we're here to talk about Convex and how I ended up on it. I'm using the opportunity to give you a lore dump, but I think this lore dump will help give you context on what I cared about. This is what I wanted. I wanted the modularity that we got from what I coined the T3 stack. I wanted this level of modularity when I built, because I wanted the ability to swap out pieces with other pieces if it ever made sense to, which it did. We started replacing Prisma with Drizzle. Surprisingly, the rest has stayed pretty well. The point being, I wanted this level of modularity and control. I wanted composable pieces that made sense, that fit together well, that we could use to build applications in a way that I and my team would be able to ship fast and with confidence. And I was so fucking proud of this stack. And it was a hot thing for a while. There was a brief moment where the init tool that was created by Nexel originally, and since has been maintained by an awesome set of contributors and collaborators, many of which are hanging out here, Create T3 app was briefly the third most popular way to spin up a React app. It did so unbelievably well. I was really proud of what I, and more importantly, y'all, the community, made happen with T3 stack. And this had me committed to a few ideas. I wouldn't accept anything that made me compromise on the modularity. I was always Linux pilled as fuck. I like small pieces that do what they're supposed to that I can assemble myself. I would not compromise on full stack type safety. I would not allow us to write code in a way that one function would think it does something and other code would think it does something else. That I will not tolerate ever in any system if I can avoid it. I really wanted single source of truth. So anything being described in code should only be described in one place, ideally. This isn't dry, to be clear. Repeating yourself for different things is fine. If you have a function that does one thing and you need to do something else, you shouldn't add a condition, you should copy paste the function. That I'm okay with. What I'm talking about is if a function returns some data, you shouldn't copy paste the type that it returns in 5 places, because now you have way more maintenance work you have to do when it makes no sense at all. Yeah, no, I don't like when your source of truth gets split up across your code base. So I go out of my way to try and make sure that the rules or the expectations of your code base are encoded in one single place and derived from there to the best of my ability. So at this point, people are starting to actually pay attention to me and know who I am. I get invited to this office talk with Ryan and Jared. The office talk again, this is at the Convex office. And I don't know jack shit about Convex at this time. Talks wrap up. We're all hanging out chatting afterwards. A Convex employee approaches me. If I recall, it was Tom. Hey, aren't you the TRPC guy? Turns out he was a huge fan of TRPC. In particular, the success it was now starting to see because of me. This idea of writing TypeScript in a way that your backend and frontend are fully aware of each other was very exciting to him and what they were doing at Convex. And he told me pretty straight up, we were super inspired by TRPC for how we designed the SDK for Convex. He gave me a brief overview of what Convex was and how it worked. And to me, it sounded like, what if Blitz was a closed source startup? And I hated this idea so much. This was like the worst thing ever to me. I just, because remember, I built this stack to be the antithesis of this more monolithic design. And what he had described was something with even more lock-in. I hated lock-in. I hated the idea that I would write things in a way that couldn't be moved, they wouldn't be portable. And everything I was hearing with him describing Convex, it honestly sounded like they stole the best parts of things like TRPC, put them in a closed source code base, contributed back nothing, and made this thing that's cool for side projects and startups, maybe. Not for me. And then a shitload of time passes. Like a shitload of time. Now we are in, this is an estimate, I don't feel like going through DMs. I'll say June 2024. I have a catch-up chat with Tanner. There's just a lot of stuff going on, drama and whatnot. You know how it is in our space. Tanner and I are catching up. He says, by the way, I was just at the Convex office. Those guys are special. They really know what they are doing. I did not expect this from Tanner. Tanner is one of my close friends. I still to this day look up to him and probably always will. One of the smartest and most thoughtful and thorough developers I've ever met. When TanStack start happens, it's going to change shit. When it's like really ready, which he will let us know when it is, things are going to get a lot better really fast. He cares so much and is so thoughtful. And he's also very quick to ignore things that don't pass his sniff test. And he's not angry about it. He just moves on. When he realizes something won't go where he thinks it should be and won't meet the expectations that he has, he doesn't try to fix it. He just moves on. Sometimes he'll build his own thing. Sometimes he'll just do something else entirely. He does not waste his time. So for Tanner to come to me and say this was incredible was a fuck, I should reconsider moment for sure. Right before then, and I don't remember timelines at all for this, I had seen WebDev Cody getting more into Convex as well. Yeah, why I use Convex over Supabase. Yeah, this was February of 2024. So I had seen this and was getting more interested in Convex. These people who I trusted, like Cody, were bringing it up more. And then Tanner, who is like a very, very well-respected person for me, told me he was taking them really seriously. I had not paid any attention to Convex between here and here, so I didn't really feel like I had anything meaningful to add. So I was like, okay, maybe it's better than I thought, because my previous intuition that this was a thing taking open source stuff and trying to sell it might be wrong for Tanner to like it as much as he did. And also, more importantly, for them to bring people like Tanner to their office to hang out showed that they were more in the trenches than I had given them credit. One of the reasons I was chatting with Tanner is drama that I can't go too into detail on, but let's just say this was during the start of the Vercel breakup. This was the point where my renewals happen. At the time when I had my main sponsors, the sponsors for the channel were the things I shipped in prod that I had reached out to and said, hey, can you sponsor the channel so I don't have to take money from your competitors and we can just have a deal that works? And it wasn't a lot of money. I was making almost as much as I made as an engineer across the 5 sponsors that I had. It wasn't a lot. It was just barely enough to pay the team. And I was making nothing. I lost money on my YouTube channel for the first 3 years. But it was fine. I had a job. I had my company that I was running. Everything was fine. I'm not saying this to complain. I'm saying this for a reality check of where stuff was at. But to be frank, some of the sponsors weren't great about paying. They had confusing expectations. None of that really mattered, though. The thing that mattered was that people were fucking pissed at Vercel for buying the opinions of influencers. To this day, there are a lot of people who genuinely seem to think I only like Vercel because they paid me. They don't realize that it was the opposite. They only pay me because I like them. To this day, I'm the only influencer Vercel has ever paid. And we had decided mutually that this level of blowback, both to them and more importantly to me, just wasn't worth it. So we ended the sponsor relationship, which would have meant I had to fire my team. Like, I could not have maintained having a effectively full-time editor, much less my now full-time channel manager too, if I didn't have all of the money coming from the small number of brands we were working with. And I decided it was time for a change. In September 2024, Theo breaks up with Vercel. You've all probably seen that video by now. If not, go watch it. I put a lot of work into that one. I was really proud of that video. It was just me trying to be real with y'all about what I was doing and that it didn't work. I wanted my channel sponsors to be products that I actually shipped in production. That didn't work. The fact that I genuinely liked and used and, to be fair, glazed the things that I really enjoyed meant that if they also paid me, I wouldn't be trusted. And that sucked. The fact that I had built my whole sponsor program around only showing you guys things I really liked, used, shipped, and trusted, that I had battle tested the hell out of, was hurting my reputation. And that, like, to this day, I will be a little salty about that. But it is reality. People's brains fall out if you don't give them a clear, like, sponsor, nice things, sponsor, end. If you don't do this, people don't understand. So we moved to a sponsor model where instead of having the 5 companies that I already use and ship in production, we would have an ad in every video where there would be a clear start and the end to the ad from various different brands that were interested in my audience. And we were also going to be a hell of a lot less picky. It's not like I'm going to let some random VPN company or like sketchy mental health app be plastered all over my channel. but it was no longer exclusive to companies I was shipping in production. We needed sponsors that were relevant to my audience, that understood me and what we were doing well, and could fit a pitch into the small 1 to 2 minute window for these ads. I was surprised how many people reached out and how quick they reached out. And I'm very thankful for all of them for funding the channel and letting us continue during this very rough time. Like, I was deep in personal finances between here and here, where I was funding the YouTube channel myself in order to pad out this change. Now we're doing better than ever because the new sponsor model, like, just to be frank, turned out to be way more profitable. So I was losing a shitload of money, like an ungodly amount of money by using the old model. I was hurting the way people trusted me, and I was constantly shilling the same number of things. It didn't work. Someone has asked a good question that is a misunderstanding I need to clarify. Didn't I say in one video that I wouldn't take money from a company that I use the software of because it would be considered fraud? Yes. If we were to do an exchange where they would sponsor my channel to give my other separate unrelated company a deal, that would be fraud. If Vercel gave us free hosting because I talked about their product, that would be fraudulent. For the entirety of the time Vercel sponsored me, I was a paying Vercel user with no special discounts or access. That is the case for pretty much all of our other sponsors as well. Some of them just give me a blanket account before they're even a sponsor because they like me and they want me to try the thing. Most don't. I get more discounts from being a Y Combinator company than I do for being a YouTuber. So to be very, very clear, my business that makes T3 chat has nothing to do with my business that is my YouTube channel. These are separate things. You can't mix and match them because they're different businesses. I can't give benefits from one to the other, or they are grouped together as one business, as one taxable entity, and then I have to give my editor health insurance through T3 chat. That's not how any of this can work. It would destroy my taxes, my financial planning, and my fucking livelihood. It's not viable, and it would be fraudulent to just do it anyways. And even my editor who's in chat agrees that would be weird as fuck. I'm not committing fraud by not giving him health insurance. He's a contractor that works with a lot of other people too, and I'm paying him an absurd amount of money, I think at least. I hope that he is comfortable with what he's being paid. Tell me if you think you deserve more money, FaZe. I will happily hand it to you. I've been planning on paying you more recently anyways. But like, when T3 chat needs a video, I edit it. FaZe works on the channel. Point being, I would not talk about a company on my channel because they gave a discount to T3 chat. That's not how any of this works. You're on my channel because I want to talk about you, or because you hit me up for one of these sponsor spots. But if you come up outside of the sponsor spot, that's no longer because you paid me. You cannot pay me to be in a video. You can only pay me to be in an ad. And even then, I have to like you enough to let you do it because we have so much inbound that I am in the privileged position where we can be really picky about who sponsors the channel. The first two sponsors to hit me up after this change were Infinite Red and Front End Masters, because both of them were effectively run by people who got what I was doing and were hyped about the opportunity. These two groups allowed us to survive and eventually allowed me to make enough money to bring Ben out here full time. He's in my kitchen as I'm filming right now. Essential to our finding success. And to be frank, they got a really good deal as a result. I charged these guys less than a fifth of what I can charge now because I just didn't know how to price these things yet. But another brand followed soon after. Convex hit me up. If Convex had hit me up before my chat with Tanner, I'll be honest, probably would have ignored it. I was still, up until this point, thinking of Convex as an all-in-one Rails alternative that's a closed source startup. But since Tanner had told me that he was taking them really seriously and he would use them if he was building a product that needed servers and needed databases, I said, you know what? Sure. Why not? We needed more sponsors. We needed to fill more spaces. Enough people I liked had said good things about Convex that I no longer felt as though recommending them would be necessarily a bad thing for my audience. I really didn't want to set people up with tech that would fail them in the future. The thought of somebody picking something because I recommended it and then being in a bad spot as a result, to this day makes me feel sick. Like, it keeps me up at night. The recommendation I made might screw somebody else over. I hate that so much. But I felt like Convex, simply by passing Tanner's sniff test, was good enough to be on the channel, especially if I did it, again, wrapped in the clear distinction that this is the sponsor part. Another thing I do when a brand sponsors me is I spend a ton of time with them on their marketing, their SDK, their branding, and whatever else is necessary for people in my audience to like the product. I don't want to sell ads to a company where my audience won't convert. I don't want to help a brand get a bunch of eyes on them if people are going to show up to their website and then not actually convert because the site doesn't actually show them where to go or help them or fails them in some way. So I put, to be frank, a disgusting amount of free consulting time into most of the sponsor deals. I've spent far too many days with any given brand, just going back and forth, helping them with their onboarding, helping them with the copy on their homepage, helping them better understand YouTube and marketing and all of these different things. I help Convex a decent bit. More than possibly any brand I've ever worked with, they were super receptive to it. And very quickly, I started seeing the value, not just in the Convex team, but in the Convex product through those conversations. I also learned around this time that they had fully open sourced all of Convex. And not just open source like the code is there. Jamie, the CEO, would personally go out of his way to make sure it was deployable at all times and will spend weekends just trying to deploy Convex on Railway for fun so people can actually use it. Super cool. Super cool. All of this started really building up my faith. And as Jamie just said in chat, I wouldn't give up on Theo. I really, really thought he would love Convex if he looked closely. And he gave me all the reasons I needed to look closely. The sponsorship ended up being the gateway for me to more closely look at Convex because, again, when you sponsor my channel, you don't give me a thing to say. When you sponsor my channel, you're paying for a time space where I will do my best to convince my audience about why your thing is interesting. I won't lie to them. I won't tell them things that aren't true, but I will not take your fucking copy. I will be riffing about your product the same way I talk about other things in my videos. And if I don't like your thing enough that I could honestly recommend it to somebody, I probably am not going to take the sponsor. So Convex and I went back and forth a lot. I helped them a ton with things. I convinced them to change the copy on their homepage. It was the other half of your React app or the missing half of your React app. So something like that to really emphasize that it was everything below React in your application. And then I started playing with it more. A big thing clicked. The moment where I went all in was very specific for me. The moment where it all clicked was when I realized something about how Convex apps are structured. Convex apps have this Convex folder in them. This Convex folder has everything from your schema that defines all of your data types, to your auth configuration that handles your authentication, to your file uploads if you have that, to all of the things you use to access your application. So to get the data from Convex, you don't just write some string and hit the DB. Everything in my schema isn't exposed. This is just a database definition. In order to expose it, I have to make another file and expose a query that hits the database and returns the data. When I realized that the entirety of how my infrastructure worked was this folder, I realized that Convex is the missing alternative to something like Terraform that I have been looking for my whole life. It clicked for me that Convex is the only true infra as code platform. Everyone else is trying to glue this concept of infra as code to random, poorly formatted config files. No one actually had a thing that required no time in a dashboard where I could take this code, give it to someone else, and they could immediately set it up with no configuration on their Convex account instead. That was a huge, oh shit, I see the light moment for me, especially because around this same time, AI app builders were catching on. Another one of the early sponsors that I should have mentioned was a little company called StackBlitz. Eric from StackBlitz came over my apartment to chat about the sponsor stuff. And I've always loved StackBlitz, the in-browser editor. And Eric's been a friend forever. He was one of the first people to catch on to me. And I'll just be frank, Eric's a hero of mine. I love that dude so much. I loved StackBlitz, and I was so excited to do everything I could to tell people how cool the in-browser code editor was. But near the end of our time hanging out, he said, by the way, I think you should see this. We're about to drop something new. I was one of the first people outside of StackBlitz. I might have actually been the first one to get to try out bolt.new. And it was really cool. I had no idea how well it would take off and how far it would go. But it was an AI app builder that could use any framework. And I was like, oh shit, I see the potential here. That's really cool that for the first time I can use Astro or Vue or Svelte or whatever else. And he wanted the ads to be about Bolt. I was hesitant because I wanted the ads to be about StackBlitz because I knew and loved StackBlitz. he really thought Bolt should be the focus for some of them. So I did that for a few. It definitely helped kickstart the launch a little bit, but Bolt took on a life of its own, and now it is a massive startup doing millions of dollars of revenue. Saved StackBlitz, who were like on the brink of bankruptcy, which I didn't even know at the time because he was sponsoring. I assumed that they were doing fine. They weren't. Bolt saved them. Now they're killing it. And also, now I'm an investor because I was so hyped on what they were doing. I bring all of this up because I started to see problems not in Bolt or its implementation, but in this whole category of apps. To this day, if you ask Lovable, Bolt, or V0 to add auth to your app, there's like a 1 in 5 chance they succeed. 75+% of the time, they'll just fail to set up auth. Ask it to add file upload. It'll pick one of 15 different services, require you to go sign up, grab an API key, paste it in, hope for the best, and then still fucking fail. These AI app builders were really good at scaffolding a UI and some of the backend functions for you. But they were good at that because of, again, to be frank, how good these front-end tools were. React made it really easy for AI to generate an app because AI can handle text generation really well. And React does a pretty good job of putting all the concerns in one place. So an AI can read the text, figure out what's missing, and add it in just that one component. It doesn't need to check a bunch of different files to find the stuff. Eventually, it got good at that, which made it even better. But React was a really good building block for AI. And here is where the spiciest take comes in. Convex isn't just the missing half of your React app. It's React for your backend. Not in the like everything's reactive sense, although it is. Convex is an alternative set of primitives for building out your applications. React said, our primitives are wrong, so we're going to make new ones. Instead of breaking our apps up into model view controller, instead of traversing the DOM with weird APIs to try and find the right thing with the right ID, instead of writing our state and data management entirely separate from the thing we show in the UI, what if we make a different set of primitives? React is an abstraction over the things we do in the browser, but it's not an abstraction in the sense that it takes it all away or it takes away our ability to assemble the pieces. It's an abstraction in the sense that it is a separate set of primitives that we can use. It's not like TypeScript, where it's a superset, where it adds new things. It's an alternative. It's a different way of thinking about how we build our web applications. And these different primitives have their own benefits and also their own use effects, but they are an alternative set that turns out to be a lot better for building most things. That's why React did so well. This idea of components and hooks as the base primitives that we build our apps on turned out to be a lot better than the chaos we were engaging with before. Convex did the same thing. There was a difference, though. React is the thing that hits your APIs. Convex is the APIs. React could infect your code base by being used for one part of it, and then slowly people see why it's useful, and it takes over your whole application. Convex is your whole application. React could succeed due to the fact that you could incrementally adopt it and solve problems with it one at a time until you go all in. Convex just didn't have that. I want to go back to this AI app builder piece, though, because this is what, in my opinion, really changed things for them. As I mentioned, React could be adopted more incrementally, and then you would use it for everything. Convex didn't have that same benefit. But what Convex did have was a better set of primitives for assembling my applications, and all of those primitives were just code. None of the things Convex does require you to go to a dashboard or hit some random API or run a CLI. You just write the code and it does it. I'm pretty good at writing code, but do you know what else is good at writing code? LLMs. Do you know what's terrible at navigating a dashboard to go configure the right IAM role or to make sure that your database is set up correctly? LLMs. Do you know what's really bad at managing state, especially when it exists in lots of different places? Us, developers. That's part of why React is so cool, is it changes how you think about state, so it's just piped straight through your app. And most of the time you're writing, you're not even thinking about state, you're just thinking about where it goes. Convex is effectively doing the same thing. I don't have to run an MCP to query an API to figure out what the current shape of my database is. I just look at the code file. If I want the database to be shaped differently, I change the file. Everything in Convex, for the most part, can be done by just changing the files in that Convex folder, which meant, first off, that I'm a very happy functional programmer because I'm not thinking about state at every step along the way. But more importantly, it meant that AI could be really good at Convex too, because it wouldn't need an MCP to change your database. It wouldn't need some weird tool call or some way to browse with the internet to figure out what the state of your application was. It is literally just infra as literally just code. And the best part is it's not some crazy new syntax or some bastardization of XML. It's just TypeScript. The depth of the it's just TypeScript thing goes beyond where I can simply put it with words. We will go through all of that together in a bit. Don't worry. It's going to be a long-ass video. I can already tell. But man, when that clicked for me, I had to hit Jamie up. I see you're in chat, Jamie. Is it okay if I share our DMs for the first time? I'll share them privately with people, but I want people to see the DM I sent. When this all clicked for me, now we're in March of this year. Have you guys thought much on doing an AI app builder built on top of Convex? We have 4 companies doing various things. They were working with all these other companies doing like AI app builders. We debated doing our own thing, but I've been scared as to how much work it would be to pull off. Maybe we're wrong about that. 903. He's talking about it. You might be right. I don't send another message. 10 minutes later, not the backend side, but reinventing yada yada. I said a lot of Bolt's open source. True. We spin it up internally, Bolt DIY. Why the fuck didn't we just run with that? Good point. Maybe we'll do that. Shit. We should do that. And not long after, we got Chef, the AI app builder partially powered by Bolt that enables you to build an app from scratch using Convex. And unlike every other AI app builder, the things it makes aren't super pretty. They're not super flashy and exciting. But unlike every other app builder, they also fucking work. I was demoing this to a friend last night, and I did my favorite, yet another Slack clone. I used their default prompt because their default prompt for it is pretty good. Build an app similar to Slack with the following features. It has channels on the left with a button to create, message panel, all these pieces. You get the idea. And it created it. I'll command minus to give us a little more space. Here is the app that it created for us. I'll make another channel quick. Hop in here. Sup, nerds. I'll add another preview. Sign in anonymously. It has auth all working, remember. Very convenient. I'll send another message. I'll send that in this one. You'll see it automatically appears in the other chats. Cool, awesome. But they added something I hadn't even thought of. And this was the like, holy shit, this is the future moment for me. This was the moment where it was all over. And I hope it has a similar effect on you as it has for me. I'm going to go to the database tab. This is an embedded version of their dashboard. And by embedded, I mean it's literally just their dashboard. Here's our data. Let's hop into messages. The message we just sent here is another message. I'm going to change this to please don't forget to subscribe. Now I'm going back to the preview. And it already changed. There is no desync. The amount of problems that go away, the amount of mental overhead that I didn't realize I was putting in to make sure everything would be synced enough to be a good experience for my users, that vanished the moment I tried that. And the hardest part is like, for us as devs, this is crazy. But to a normal person, this is just how you would expect it to work. You would expect that changing the data, the thing in this tab, would have the same effect as changing the code, the thing in this tab. A normal person that hasn't written code for years doesn't think that these two tabs should be that different. Like, one is your database, one is the code. Why would changing something here change the UI immediately, but changing something here requires you to refresh? It doesn't make sense for normal people. We have all been conditioned into this, and we were wrong. This is how it should work for application data. Now I'm in. This was the magic aha for me. And also, just to be frank, it made demoing it a lot easier. All of a sudden, I felt way more confident showing people Convex because that demo is so killer. Not just because it's super flashy, because it is. Like, that's a really cool demo. And it goes way further. If I spin up localhost with my dev environment for T3 chat, here's my T3 chat dev environment using Next and Convex. I'm kind of using Next, as we've mentioned many times before. It's my bastardized semi-fork. I'm also hopping into my dev instance of Convex for T3 chat. So here's my T3 chat. Here is my Convex instance. Here is the thread information about oranges. Let's hop into the data, threads, information about oranges, change it to grapes, instantly changes. I'll split the view so you can see both at the same time. Changing it to apples, pressing enter, instantly changes. So many problems go away with this. It's insane. The amount of time I have spent making sure data is up to date before you do something is, I hadn't even thought about how much of my life I lost to it. And again, the comparison I'm going to keep making is with React because it feels very similar to me in that regard. Most of y'all are young enough that you don't know the pain of checking if an element is on the page before updating it. If I want to change the state of a button on click, I need to know if the button is there. So I try to find it using the ID. Then if it exists, I update it. And if not, I probably panic or throw. The amount of time we've all spent back in the jQuery era to make sure things are right before we do the next thing made me not like web dev. I genuinely didn't like web dev for most of my career because so much of it was spent just making sure things were right before doing the next thing. React got rid of all that. It meant the default state was very clear, and if you are doing something, the element doing it exists. A button's on-click can't exist without the button existing, and the function is defined within the context of that component. It made everything so much easier to understand, compose, scale, and everything else between. It just made life way better for developing on the web. Convex did that for me for my backend. And I never thought I would see the day. I never thought I would pick a platform that does this much for me. What I realized is it's not just like a Firebase alternative that is an all-in-one solution that handles everything for you and gives you a shitty SDK that you hit the database with directly. Convex is a different set of better primitives for building your applications. The same way that React replaced getElementById with components, Convex replaces database migrations and IAM roles with TypeScript. It's magical when it clicks. Obviously, Chef is doing very well for them. People are trying it, discovering the magic, and using it. But there's another part of my journey that I think is important to cover. This all is part of the chunk that I just mentioned. I'll say this was March of 2025 is when most of this started happening. This is the Theo sees the light moment for sure. But there was one other important thing that happened between that I didn't talk about quite yet. I made T3 chat. And I really wanted to do things I hadn't done before. Up until T3 chat, most of what I built was heavily driven by the server. That's why I was such a big server component guy. Because again, my goal is to reduce these potential cases where more state exists in the wrong places that make it more likely the client's in the wrong state or something can go wrong. In my opinion, the more your app can be driven by the server and the data on the server, the less likely you are to hit weird things. And Convex thankfully agrees. I did see him say something earlier about this. We agree with Theo. Convex is React for backends. Yeah, this idea of functional idealing, where your application is a pipe, where on one side is data and on the other side is the user experience. The more you could think about things that way, instead of stuffing state in every step along the way, the more reliable your experiences will be and the easier it is to work in those code bases. Always. I will die on this hill forever, and I'm very thankful they are aligned with me on this. That said, I really wanted T3 chat to be fast as fuck. Obviously, local first will always be better than server driven for performance in general. Like when you're navigating around a site, not having to wait for the server to get you the data will always be faster than waiting on the server. Obviously, if you write the code really poorly, you wrote the code really poorly. But in the extremes of good design, local first will be better than server driven. I wanted T3 chat to be the best ever. And we fought hard. And part of that was I built my own local first sync engine. I won't go too much into details because I have many a different time. Go watch my other videos about the database migrations if you want to better understand the hell I put myself through building my own local first sync engine. The TLDR is Dexy is really good. The API it's built on top of, IndexedDB, is utter garbage. Everyone in the sync engine plus local first space is either ignorant or a liar. Oh man, I have been to hell and back. I won't call specific people out because I don't fault them for it. Everything they're saying should be true. It just isn't. I tried so hard to make all of this work. And I put a lot of effort into exploring other options. We were one of the first companies trying to deploy Zero. We looked deeply into everything from Tinybase to Legend State to lots of other in-between solutions. And no matter what we did, nothing worked in reality. The reality is that local first means something different to everybody, and the reasons that you want it vary a ton. Therefore, no one-size solution can work. If you honestly think the same sync and local first solution can work for both Figma and Linear, you have some fundamental misunderstanding of both products that I cannot resolve in one video. There is no world in which those two products that both do local first and sync could possibly use the same primitives to build a similar thing. It just obviously that is true. And for some reason, all the local first people seem to think they can do that. Convex doesn't. And I felt a tangible difference between my conversations with the local first community and my conversations with Convex. They were much more realistic about the state of local first, and specifically that they didn't support it at all. They've expressed interest in trying to figure it out in the future, but they knew it was such an absurd, chaotic rabbit hole that they chose to just not do it. And that was the right call, because local first kind of fucking sucks to build. At this point, I was considering many different options. I almost purchased a startup because I wanted to poach the founder to build our sync engine for us, because I was so tired of maintaining it ourselves. I explored all of the options, including Convex, and concluded that none of them did what we needed. But after one last lap and one last attempt to do it myself, I accepted the fact that if I got rid of two pieces, specifically if I was willing to let go of the local first piece, and I was willing to let go of the idea that specifically the tokenized stream should go through the DB. If I could give this up, as well as local first, a lot of different sync engines suddenly would become viable for our product. What I mean here is when you generate a message on T3 chat, I'll use Lambda because it's fast. Write me 10 poems about React. See how fast those tokens are coming in? And they're coming in the individual characters, well, the groups of characters between like 4 and 10 when they're ready. So if I want one source of truth, if I want one pipe from my servers to my user, the ideal would be that this generation goes through those pipes. In an ideal world, the user would send to the server, generate a response, obviously with the context of like what it's generating a response to. The server would then send each token as it's generated over to the database, which would then send it down to the user's chat UI. This would be my ideal. You tell the server to generate a response. This generates, we'll tell it count from 1 to 100. And then this sends 1, then it sends 2, then it sends 3, then it sends 4, etc. And each time one of those comes in, it would send it down so that you would see it in the UI in your app. The problem is that that's not how sync engines work. When you update the content of a database that is a sync engine, it doesn't send down what changed. It doesn't send down 1 and then say add 2 to it. It sends 1, then it sends 1, 2, then it sends 1, 2, 3, etc. You just send a disgusting amount of data down as a result of this. Sync engines don't work for this problem unless you store each token individually. We go through 1 trillion tokens a month minimum right now. We're not going to store 1 trillion fucking rows in any of these things. If your rows are messages, which they should be, this does not work. And that breaks my heart. I wanted this to work so badly, and it cannot do it. A lot of sync engine companies will tell you they could do it. They are lying to you, and you should run. I have heard so many stupid things about how AI actually works from these companies that have confidently asserted everything from, well, you can just pull OpenAI to know when it's done, to, well, don't the API send you down paragraphs anyways? Why don't you store those? None of that is reality. Why do you speak so confidently about things you don't understand? Oh, because you build local first sync engines. That makes sense. My rant about local first coming in the near future. The point I'm trying to make here is, this is my ideal, and this isn't how reality works. When I brought this up with Convex, Jamie responded very quickly, oh yeah, that does suck, doesn't it? We have some solutions we've built, but they're kind of out of date. Here's an article we wrote about this like a year ago. We're going to go overhaul this a bit. And after chatting with them and seeing the stuff they were doing, I was inspired, and I had a realization myself. The thing I wanted here of showing these messages right when they're ready, when each token comes in, that's an optimistic update. What actually matters is that when the whole thing is done, 1, 2, 3, 4 to 100, that this all goes to the database and can be sent down to the user. But I want to show each piece right when it's ready. This is the completed message. The completed message goes from the server to the DB to the user. But I want to show them more. If I also send back to the user the thing I was describing before, the tokenized stream, and I treat this as an optimistic update, where I show this if I have it, I wait if I don't. Life got significantly easier when this clicked. And this only clicked for me because Convex was aware enough to have the conversation and have their own recommendations and solutions. And this is how they were doing it in their examples. Once I split it up this way, where the completed message goes to DB and then to user, and the partial message is just streamed down with server sent events, the way you would with most LLM generation stuff, life got a lot easier. And what I realized afterwards is I can take this section here, this optimistic update layer, I can wrap this with a Redis pub sub and then make this part resumable. So our chat stream resumability, which is one of the coolest features on T3 chat in my opinion, I'll do a model that's slow to show it off. I'm gonna tell this to, with Kimmy K2, write 10 poems about React. This model's kind of slow, so this will take a sec. But it's coming in, you can tell each token right when it comes in. I'm gonna go open up my other browser. And here it is streaming in with no use of Convex. Convex isn't helping with this part because this is an optimistic update. Convex tells T3 chat, here are your threads, here are your messages, here are the contents of the messages as far as we know, but the stream isn't stored in Convex. Right now, Convex thinks this is an empty message, but it gave it a restoration ID, which I'm doing through PubSub, through Redis. This is the best of all worlds, and it has made life way better for us with maintaining T3 chat. This isn't because Convex gives us the features. This is because Convex is right. They think about these things and they give you the right mindset to solve the problem. And the reason I'm going into all the detail here is it was yet another moment where I realized how fucking awesome Convex was as a set of primitives. Because Convex's primitives handle this part really well, where you send the update to the database. They handle this part even better, where they make sure the UI always knows exactly what the database is holding in it. They don't do jack shit for this part, but they don't have to. I could do this part myself however I want. That's the magic of Convex, is it is a better set of primitives for most things. It's kind of funny that I'm showing you how much I love Convex by showing you how I'm not using them, but I think it will show how powerful this set of primitives is. And at this point, I'm all in. This has all been clicking over this period of time. I do one last attempt to make our existing sync engine work, but I realize that I am holding back my whole team because I'm the only one at the company that actually understands our DIY sync engine. No one else can really change how our data layer works, which means nobody can change the structure of our database, add new things, fix sync, or do anything else. So Theo rewrites all of T3 chat around Convex. You guys remember the T3 chat beta, where beta.t3 chat was a thing. That was the early version of this rewrite. And man, I fell in love fast. Huge shout out to the Convex team on all of this, by the way. We created a shared Slack channel. They were in our code base, paying attention to what issues we hit and fixing them. I would estimate minimum 10 times I told them confidently that their shit was fucked. Like I would say that their caching was broken, that their auth was broken, all these things. All 10 times I was wrong. Their stuff worked so well. And despite the fact that every single time I confidently say the thing was wrong, they would quadruple check and assume I was right. And then turns out their shit was right. And we had some other thing either I did wrong or one of our deps did wrong or something else in our pipeline of solutions wasn't working. Not a single time was Convex the problem when I tried calling out Convex for being the problem. They know their fucking shit. And that cache layer, by the way, is fucking incredible. 98% of our queries, if not more, are hitting a cache. So they're not even reading from the database at all. It's so good. We'll get into all that in a bit. But this is when I went all in. And now I use Convex for everything I build that is TypeScript. I have two specific things I want to do right here, like the last two big pieces for this video. One is all the little things I love. And the other is when shouldn't you use Convex. Okay, there's a third one too that I really want to do, which is the little things that piss me off. Because as always, there are things I don't like. And this isn't a sponsored video. I mean, it is sponsored, but by somebody else. Convex is not paying for any of this. They have not at any point told me to be careful with how I explain things. They don't give a fuck. They like when I roast them because there's more stuff for them to do. So I'll talk about all the things that piss me off. But I think this is an important piece first. I don't want people thinking I'm saying use Convex for everything. I'm not. That said, if your data is only used on a backend and client that is written in TypeScript, it's really hard to justify using anything else. That's my honest take. If your database is a thing that is exclusively used in your application and in your backend, and those two things are both TypeScript, you should be using Convex almost certainly. But the moment that changes, like if you need a separate backend in Go, or you need a CLI written in Rust, or if you need your data team to have direct access to run analytics and shit, at those points, Convex stops making sense almost immediately. There are ways to make it work, and they'll tell you all about them. I'm going to tell you, don't even fucking bother. But I also don't like any of these cases anyways. Separate backend in Go probably doesn't need to happen unless you have weird specific performance bottlenecked things that need Go. And then you can go write those things in Go and call them from TypeScript. Probably not a real case. But if you have a backend team that is insisting they write everything in Go, you weren't looking at Convex in the first place. Let's be real. Don't look at them. They're not for you. That's fine. You're building CLIs and things that aren't TypeScript. I would want to see what you're doing with it, but there's a good chance you don't need a database at all. And even if you do, you probably don't want Convex for it. But this bottom one is important. If your database is being accessed by multiple different applications, multiple different backends, multiple different things, the same database to be clear, Convex doesn't make a lot of sense because my database and its definitions and everything, they live in my app code. The T3 chat codebase's database is right here. This is our actual schema for T3 chat in the T3 chat codebase. There's one package JSON, still named Better Chat Next because that was the interim name. This has all of our front-end code. It has Next.js, has all these things, and it has Convex and all the Convex stuff that we need to make our database work. That's all one codebase, one project. If we had a separate backend team using their own tech stack and their own everything, and they wanted access to this database and to have control over it some amount, no, not a good experience with Convex. Not what it's for at all. When these things are tightly coupled, which they usually are, let's be real, that's when it works well. But since this case is something I see a lot of people concerned about, I want to jump on it and tell you, like, if you really need this, if you need other teams and other backends to use the same database at the same time, Convex doesn't make sense. Okay, now that the people who were going to leave the rude comment are satisfied, I'm going to say the thing that pisses them off. Hopefully they've already left the video. Fingers crossed we are now deep enough in the weeds that they're already gone. Don't fucking do this. If your data team needs access to the database to run analytics and shit, give them a different fucking database. Just fire hose out whatever you're doing in Convex somewhere else. If this is what we have here, your analytics team or your data team needs something else, take like fucking ClickHouse or like Axiom or even just using PostHog or whatever directly. Who cares? Just send all the data there. It's very easy to do that. Convex has a ton of options for just dumping all of the data over whenever it comes in. Your application database is for your application. And if you have an application database, it should probably be Convex. Like I didn't realize how much I was trying to shoehorn SQL into my apps until I went all in on Convex. It just made so much more sense. It's not an ORM. It's not a thin layer. It's a different set of primitives that make building apps better. In a lot of ways, it's the thing that Uncle Bob was pushing for that everyone, including myself, gave him shit for. It was my fault. I sent him down the spiral where he was like schizo posting and doing the bathrobe rants about how SQL is this evil, terrible thing ruining our apps. And a few months later, I agree with him because of Convex. SQL has no place in our application code. SQL is a data language. It's not application languages. Could you theoretically write a new SQL-like thing that is better for app code? Sure. Convex said no. Why bother? Why not just rebuild it using TypeScript instead? Convex is the TypeScript layer for building application and application data layers, and it does it so well. That all said, this is for TS devs. You're not using TypeScript. This isn't for you. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. Have fun in your Rust and Go worlds. Have fun building things that are 100 times faster for 1% of what users do. I'm proud of you guys. Seriously, you're building important, awesome stuff. Don't tarnish what we have going on in this world. All of that said, you should check out their backend to GitHub because Convex is written in Rust. Convex wrote the ideal sync engine, data layer, ORM, toolkit, compiler, and all these other things for us in Rust correctly so that you never have to for your applications. And more importantly, your AI never has to for your applications. I've never had so much fun vibe coding as I have with Convex and Claude 4, because there are good, simple, well-documented primitives that you can assemble to solve pretty much any problem. And here's where we get into this section. All the little things I love. Up until this point, we haven't actually looked at any of the Convex code. So let's start with that vibe-coded app that we just made using Convex Chef. This is the Slack clone that I mentioned before. Slack clone has channels, it has auth, it has messages, they auto-sync. When you change them, they update. We'll start with the client code because we want to see how we're consuming these things. It has to be super complex to handle the updates and stuff, right? Const messages equals use query, api.messages.list. The first two things I hate. The first one is that they clobber the term use query. The Convex React package exports use query use mutation because they're very inspired by the things going on in the open source world. They were very inspired by and excited by tRPC and React query and the combo. So they built their own. My really hot take is that for using Convex, I still prefer theirs to their React query bindings. You can use Convex with React query, but I actually prefer Convex's things for this. If you're using Convex and you're using React, I still think you should use Convex's hooks. But now whenever I see use query in my code base, I don't know which one it is, which sucks. Benefits and negatives. So that's -1. -2 is that with their use query hook, if you want to skip a query, if you want to not do this one until it is ready, you pass skip as the argument. There is a magic string argument that you can optionally pass as the second argument to use query that will skip the query. Cool. Annoying as fuck. I'm saying cool semi-ironically. I hate this. I hate magic strings that do weird shit like this. Just give me a configuration object. That's what React Query moved to. I think it was too early in its development for this to have a similar pattern. It's annoying. Okay, third annoying thing. Messages is the data. It's not returning data, comma, loading, comma, error like React Query does. It's returning messages if it has messages, or it's returning undefined if it doesn't. Oh, and it throws if you get an error. So don't love that. That all said, here's all the code you have to write to get the messages to the UI. This handles the subscription and the syncing as well too. So now when you are updating messages, it will automatically update in the UI. And this is just messages. If we scroll down a little bit and we see it and we're rendering it, display messages.map. Is this a thing that we changed about the messages? Let's see how we do this. Oh, if we're searching, we only show search results. Otherwise, we just show messages. So display messages is just one of those two arrays. And then we just render them. There's nothing special here. How about sending a message? Send message equals use mutation API messages send. Wait, don't we need to add like an on success invalidate here where we have some function that we run when this is done that will invalidate the other query? Don't we have to do something like that like we do in every other tool? Like how can we just send the message and be done? That makes no sense. It does when you realize we're using different primitives. The same way that it makes no sense in React initially, that when you call set state, the UI changes. It makes no sense initially with Convex that when I send the mutation, the UI gets updated accordingly. So let's go look at the backend code for getting messages here. API messages list. Convex messages list. Here it is. Very easy to find. Export const list equals query. The query is coming from their generated code. Query is a type-safe query helper that lets you define, similar to tRPC, you'll see a lot of familiarity here, args, which is the object that is our validator that will make sure we're passing arguments that are valid, and then the handler, which is the function that gets called as long as the arguments are valid. So channel ID is v.id channels. By the way, this is type safe. Channels is a key in our schema, and it has an ID, so we can call their validator v, which is annoying because valibot also is v, whatever, small annoyances. v.id requires it be one of the IDs that you have here, one of the values here. But now, if you pass something that isn't a valid channel ID, it won't even get to the handler. So not only can we check that it's actually a string or actually a number or actually a Boolean or whatever, we can check that it's an ID for an actual thing that exists. And if it doesn't, we don't even run the code. Cool. So we then get the user ID with our helper getAuthUser function. There's no user ID, we throw an error. Then we grab the messages. .query messages with index. Indexes are really cool. I'll get into those in a bit. By channel. So here we're grabbing where the channel ID is equal to args.channel ID. We order ascending, collect to get them all. But then we need the authors because remember, we don't just want to show you the message and the timestamp or whatever else. We want to show you who made it. And if we look at the code and the schema, we don't have author's information. We just have the author ID. So don't we need to do a join or something to make this efficient? Don't we have to, when we query messages, subquery for the authors? This is one of those things that feels really dirty, the same way that updating your UI with a set state call feels dirty in React initially. And then when it clicks, you're like, oh shit, that's way better. You get the authors by calling messages.map, getting the author by its ID, and then even cooler, because auth doesn't live in your database the same way that it might when you use betterauth or nextauth or whatever else. The author, the user here, is just a user identifier. So it has like their email or whatever they signed up with, their tokens and whatnot. It doesn't have their preferences, their profile picture, all those things. What we put those in is a profiles schema. I have a hardline stance on this. Your application table and your auth and like OAuth tokens management table are different problems and they should be different places. If implementation details of your auth have leaked into your application DB, you have 4 problems now instead of 1. Profiles is application level concern. The display name a user chooses, the avatar for their profile picture, these are details that are application specific details. How the user signs in and how their token gets invalidated is not an application concern. That's an auth concern. Separating that out, putting it somewhere else, and then linking it to the thing in your database makes life so much easier. Because you're not joining on the user's valid token. You're joining on the user's ID, and you're joining on their profile. So what we do here is we just write the fucking code. We get the author by calling contextdb.get message.authorID. We have to specify what table it's from, because authorID is a type-safe identifier that is unique to authors. Then when we want the profile, we do have to be more specific because we want to only grab them where they match. And the ID for the profile is different than the ID for the auth user. We know that because when we go to the schema, we see user ID, v.id users. So this is how it's linked. So we grab the user from the database. We then grab their profile and their configuration, again from the database. .query profiles with index by user, grab the user by the ID, .unique to make sure it's a unique return. We grab the avatar URL. If there is an avatar ID, then we go grab the URL for it from storage. And now we have the files, because by the way, it handles file upload too. We're still using upload thing, but in a lot of my recent projects, I'm not even bothering because built into Convex and it works totally fine. And now we just return all of this. And this is in the map, by the way. So message with authors. For each message, we then map the message to author. We put their name with all these fallbacks and the avatar URL here too. And then we return the result. There's no custom syntax. There is no weird SQL mappings. There is no effort to avoid calling await more than once. I have whole videos where I explain why you specifically don't want to do this. You don't have multiple blocking calls between the request and the response. And people are asking the right questions in chat. How is this performant? Great question. Because when you look at this code and you know what you're doing, this can't be performant. There are some important details to know about how this is implemented. You don't need to go as in the weeds as I've chosen to. If you want to just take my word on it, believe me when I say this is performant and move on, that's cool with me. But I like these details. They're cool. This code, this API, doesn't run on Node. This is not a Node.js function. This doesn't run on a traditional Node server. It's kind of similar to Workerd, which is what Cloudflare workers run on, but also very different. It's a minimal custom runtime that they built. I believe it's based on V8 still, but it's their runtime built in Rust that takes over a handful of things that are important. For example, if I'm inserting a bunch of things, like here we're sending a message. If I wanted to send the created at, and we did new date here. If I'm sending 4 messages at once and I want all of them to have the same date, I could do the right thing, which is const sent at equals new date, and then reuse it. But if I'm dumb and do it this way instead, you would get different dates for all of them. Unless you use Convex, and then they will make sure at request time that whatever this would return is consistent for the entirety of this request. This is just one of the many examples of the things they have done that honestly, when I first heard about them, I assumed would get in my way and piss me off. They've never done anything that confused me literally ever. It just works because their custom runtime has the one big key feature that when you're doing these await calls on the DB, it's not going to block and wait for each one of those. It's going to take everything you did here, flatten it, make it a single transaction, and then fire it for you, both for queries and much more importantly for mutations, because everything you do here can be undone and replayed and follow CRDT bullshit perfectly. So if you're doing a mutation that has to do like 20 different things, it gets through 19 fine, and then the 20th fails. It doesn't leave it in a partially committed state. It rolls back all of it. None of it happens. It's almost using TypeScript as a compiler step to generate the transaction that actually needs to fire. Ooh, I love this analogy actually from Nick here. It's kind of like React scheduler, but networked. Detail-wise, absolutely not, but conceptually, 100% yes. So you get to write the stupid, simple, obvious, easy, wrong TypeScript code, and what comes out is fast as fuck. Do you know how awesome that is for not just us to write vanilla TypeScript with fucking for loops and maps and have it work how it's supposed to? It's even more awesome for AI because you don't have to teach it a new syntax or hope it gets things right with SQL because SQL isn't type safe. AI is good at writing SQL, but if it writes it incorrectly, you don't know until you're running it. And now we're getting the important question, because it's the same one I had. I've never had a case of the compiler being awkward. I haven't. I don't know how. It's fucking black magic. It just does what it's supposed to. It's crazy. There are edges where it is annoying, not because of the compiler, but because of the cache layer. And even then, it's small shit that they're fixing. Yeah, Dom, you're right. This is the solution to Uncle Bob's problem. It's incredible. It has made the way that I build so much easier and more reliable. And it has made it way better to vibe code out in Cursor or Claude Code or whatever fucking else. And we're not even at like the coolest parts. Since this is all just in TypeScript, it's all type safe. Everything knows what everything is. If I download this code, here is that code base as an env.local. Notice that there isn't really anything in here that's a secret. It doesn't fucking matter. The deploy key, cool. You can deploy on my dev thing, whatever. I'm just going to kill this because it doesn't matter for what I'm about to show. It's using npm, and fuck that. I'm going to delete that too. pnpm install. Dev frontend and dev backend. But I'm just going to run dev backend because I don't actually want to run this. pm run dev backend. Now it's going to spin up the generation, which by the way, you commit the generated file, so you don't even need to do all of that. I'm just choosing to. Oh, I need to deploy it somewhere. Normally, I'd have to go configure this all in the back end and set everything up myself. Nope. Create a new project. Theo BR's team, because I'm already signed in. Cloud or local. If you want to run the backend locally, you can. I don't. I'm just going to use the cloud. Now I have this all provisioned in Convex. You just click it and you're there. All done. All the tables set up. All of the auth handled. Everything's done. We're good. So the thing I wanted to show you now is the type safety. Let's hop back into the UI here. We'll hop in, go to the message area. Messages is use query. Oh, what type errors are we getting? Promise returning. Oh, I have a lint rule that you have to explicitly void on things. Whatever, I don't care. We'll leave that. Not a big deal. But here we have messages. And when I hover this, it knows the exact type. Author, name string, avatar URL string or null, ID underscore for the built-in ID and creation time, and everything else is the fields that we have in our database. And when I command click on this, it brings us to the backend function that gets us that data. A huge piece of the tRPC magic. Watch what happens when I change this from name to title. I haven't saved, and we went from 2 errors to 5. Command Z, back to 2. Command Shift Z, back to 5. Because even though it's generated, the generated code is just pointing the client to the type definitions in the TypeScript file that you write. I could kill the server entirely, so I'm not running anything for this app. And I'm still getting all of the type safety I would expect. Where I get an error here when I try to render this, because that doesn't exist anymore, even without the save happening. So even though it is code gen, the code gen is generating pointers, it's not generating type definitions. So everything ends up significantly easier to interface with and deal with. And now, if you change your schema in a way that isn't compatible with your UI, you get the type error in the UI. If you change how you're returning the data here, you don't get an error in this file, you get an error where it's being consumed. The error goes where the error manifests, which is great for us as we're writing the code because we can see what breaks when we make changes, but it's even better for AI because it's not getting an error saying you returned the wrong type and then changes it, and then it gets another error downstream and changes it, and then finally after 5 changes gets to the component and realizes, oh, I did the wrong thing. If you change your database and the UI doesn't match the expectation, you get the error in the UI. So good. This is why I went all in on tRPC, because this full back to front end pipe of type safety makes building so much easier and more reliable. And that's just part of how Convex works. And there's so many of these little things that you realize when you buy into their different set of primitives that make life so much better. So how does this live update? I haven't even talked about that. Well, let's look at messages. Let's look at send specifically. Takes in a channel ID so we know what channel it's going to, and content so we know what we want to post. User ID, await, get off, same exact thing. You just throw when you don't want it to happen. We could check if the user is part of this channel here if we wanted. So if we were to const channel, get that. If no channel, we could then check if the user's in the channel here the same exact way. And then to actually insert the message, context.db.insert, the name of the table, then the object for what you want to insert. Guess how you insert multiple things? You guessed it, a for loop. Yeah, it's just TypeScript. So where does the update happen? How does the UI change? Remember that thing I said before where it effectively is compiling your code here into a transaction? It's not just compiling that for the lookup, it's compiling that as a cache key. It is taking all of the rows that are hit and all of the pieces that are important to resolving this request, gives them a cache key, and then when you do something that would affect that cache key, like add a new message, it invalidates that cache key and sends the update down. The magic of treating the query you write here as a compiled transaction isn't just that it makes the transaction faster, it's that it gives them a really, really strong level of introspection on what could have changed it. Again, it's super reacty, not just because it updates automatically, but because the relationship between these parts and the slightly higher up abstraction they have built makes it so much easier to identify when things change and update them accordingly. This is also why when I go change it in the database directly without running code, it just works. Okay, I think I have covered the higher level, how Convex has just entirely rewired my brain, but I haven't gotten into all these little things that I love. I still really want to, but I think I have decided in this moment that that will be a separate video. There are such an absurd number of these little things, from how much easier webhooks are, to how much better the development experience is, to the way that you do things like running seed functions and whatnot, to how they think of migrations, to work pools, to their component model. There are all these little things that I genuinely love about them that it feels like a separate video of its own. I was fully ready to sit here and do all of this as one video, but I feel like I've communicated why I like Convex well here. If you think I should do a separate video in the future about all the little things I love, let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to do that. One last thing we need to dive into, the arguments against Convex. And remember, I was quite anti-Convex for almost 4 years before flipping and betting everything on it. So let's go through a handful of these, and I'm also hanging out with my Twitch chat so you guys can ask your own as well. Give me your skeptic takes. Why do you think Convex doesn't make sense? This feels like connecting directly to the database from the front end. I even have a diagram for this one. It's about GraphQL, but it's the same difference. GraphQL goes here, not here, meaning between the database and the server, not between the server and the user. This whole diagram gets fucked up by Convex, but if you're still thinking in this way, it does make sense. Like when you're building with Firebase, you are defining the schema, you're defining the permissions on the schema, and then the user and the client side just hits the database effectively directly. This is one of the biggest things that Convex does differently. Here is our schema. Here's all of the things that are in our database. The user has no access to any of these. These cannot be hit from client. The only way that you can read or write things in the database is through defining queries and mutations. You can't just on client side write to some shit. This is, as far as I'm concerned, fully Eva proof. If you guys are not familiar with Eva, she's the hacker that has pwned hundreds of companies because they use Firebase and they forgot to auth a specific table that she could write to and then hack your computer because you were using Arc. Eva's done terrible things to Firebase code bases because Firebase encourages bad patterns for data access. Convex blocks you from those patterns. You can't do it. The way you get data out of your database in Convex is you write a function that is effectively an endpoint. That is how you get the data from the database. You can't just hit up the schema. You can't just query arbitrary things. Users can only get to your data through the portals you define for them through queries and mutations. The amount of problems that go away when you have to define the access layer is immense. The problem is that defining that access layer used to be too expensive to do, and front-end devs and app devs especially hated APIs too much to figure out how to do it. Here, that's not the case. You kind of just write TypeScript. It's just like writing the function. You can almost think of it as like This is what you would have written on the client with Firebase, but now you're writing it on the server with Convex. And it gives you all the cool performance characteristics like the flattening of the transactions, the cache keys, and all these other things. But it is still an endpoint on the server that you're defining. Users can't run this code. Users, more importantly, can't skip this code. They can hit this function. So your reservations against Firebase are correct. If you were avoiding Convex because you felt like it worked like Firebase, I understand. You're right about Firebase. You're wrong about Convex. You have to define queries and mutations. They're just a startup. It probably doesn't scale. This is another one of the ones I really felt. I was convinced I would not be able to use Convex because I build things that get a lot of users. T3 chat has made so many databases crumble. Like, just to be frank, Supabase would crumble immediately under the weight of T3 chat. I briefly tried it with test load and it collapsed instantaneously. The things we do not work on databases that don't scale. That's why we love PlanetScale so much. And when I moved to Convex, I missed PlanetScale. So I bullied them into kissing, and now Convex is built on top of PlanetScale. But the Convex being built on top of PlanetScale is like a cool, fun implementation detail that helps handle some of the reservations people have. But the thing that made me more excited by far was that they passed the SAM sniff test. Sam Lambert's the CEO of PlanetScale. He is as picky as they come about database everything. I cannot tell you how many times I've chatted with him about how pathetic every database product is and all the things we hate about Postgres. He is probably the smartest database person I know other than like 2 or 3 of his employees. When I introduced him to the Convex guys, he very excitedly came up to me at an event a few days later, to which he said, "I wish I could hire them." I have never heard Sam say that to me about anybody I've introduced him to. They passed his database sniff test, his data admin and everything test, because they know what they're doing. The Convex founders are the ones who scaled Dropbox. They are the ones who found the performance issues in S3. They really know what they're doing. And Sam quickly noticed that in them. This was a huge, oh shit, they can do this moment for me. This is a big, like, it clicked. And now for the most important piece of pushback that I think is important to have in this particular video. What about the lock-in? I've talked a lot about lock-in in the past, and it took a while for my current methodology and like mindset to really click in a way I think I can explain. But there's 2 types of lock-in. There's the type that I think is what people are concerned about, which is code that is platform or provider specific. For an example of this, you can look at something like Gel. Gel is a company that I work with that I'm an advisor for that is also a really cool database company. They are rethinking the query language and the way the database runs to make much better graphing and relational data. Their data model is really cool. I think they're doing awesome stuff. They have their own syntax, Gel. They used to be EdgeDB, by the way. If you're vaguely reminiscent of this, their old name was EdgeDB. Now they're Gel. The syntax, the language, the database, all these parts are their own thing. So if you write code based on Gel, it'll make a lot of things way easier for you. Like the syntax for doing weird relations and math throughout them and shit is significantly better than traditional SQL. But if you decide it's time to move off, also I noticed this is still .edgeql, not .gel. They haven't updated everything yet. That's funny. Yeah. Point being, if you write this query, you now have everything in this other language, this other syntax, this other way of building. You can't just move off. You're writing a lot of code, a lot of stuff that is specific to this provider. Even though you can host it yourself, even though you can do other things with it, you're still locked into their way of thinking. So what's the other type? There's code that's platform or provider specific. The other type is that the platform provides things you otherwise would have written yourself. This is a thing I think a lot about because of the complaint about lock-in on Vercel. People were upset with Next.js middleware because the middleware runs on Edge and the rest runs in the traditional node instance on a traditional server. That is an infrastructure detail that you can implement yourself if you want. Next.js can't magically do that for you though because it's a framework, it's not infrastructure. So if you want that feature and you're using Next, the easiest way by far to have that feature is to do it on Vercel. Other platforms can add this feature. You can even build it yourself, but you're using Vercel to avoid doing that. They are preventing you from having to write this code. The same goes for how stuff like incremental static revalidation works. The same goes for how most of the caching stuff in Next and Vercel works. The same goes for image optimization. The same goes for server components. The same goes for so many of these things. When you move from Vercel to Cloudflare, you're not replacing code with different code. you're writing the code that Vercel allowed you to skip writing. So if you're on Vercel, they're providing all these awesome things for you, and you decide, okay, I'm moving to Cloudflare, or I'm moving to Netlify, or I'm moving to AWS and hosting it myself on Lambda. The diff for that pull request that you're submitting up on GitHub is plus 8,000 minus 0. You are not deleting code when you make that type of move. I would make the argument that that isn't even lock-in. That is a platform providing you things that otherwise you would have written yourself. So I don't actually perceive a lot of lock-in on Vercel. Vercel is a set of pipes that allow my code to run, take data from one place, and give it to the users. What's weird with Convex is it's a bit of both. Convex has parts that fit in both of these buckets. And I can say this confidently because I had to write all of the things Convex does myself before, and it fucking sucked. Moving off of Vercel feels like lock-in because suddenly you're writing a whole bunch of code. But it's not that you're deleting and replacing code that you wrote before. You're not writing Vercel-specific code. You're paying the piper for the code that Vercel kept you from having to write for all of that time. Convex is largely that, where if I wanted to have full type safety between my database and my user, I can bring in 3 tools and build a bunch of stuff myself for it. If I want to have syncing work where something changes and everybody gets an update, I can pull in Pusher, I can add my own watcher layer, and I can send everything around via WebSockets myself. All of the things that I care about with Convex are things I could have built myself. And when I realized I was DIYing a worse Convex, that's when I moved over. But I can also self-host it if I want. It's very surprisingly easy now, especially to self-host. So if you want to move off and host it yourself, awesome, you can do that. If you want to move off and write your own code again, cool, you can do that. There is stuff you'll have to delete. Like pretty much everything in the Convex directory is specific to Convex. So in that sense, you are locked in some amount. This code would have to be deleted if I moved off of Convex. But a lot of the code on the client side would still be there. And honestly, the code that we're writing in here is relatively simple and minimal. You would have to rewrite it in SQL instead of this. But what I am thinking about more when I think about lock-in is, can I self-host? Can I ever stop paying this company? And how much work do I have to throw away to move off? With Next.js, can I self-host? Yes. Can I ever stop paying the company? Absolutely. How much work do I have to throw away to move off? None. But then how much work do I have to do to move off? These are the different pieces to think about when you're doing the lock-in equation in your head. So Vercel, self-host, yes. Stop paying company, yes. Work you have to throw away, none. How much work do you have to do to move off? A ton. But that work isn't anything to do with Next or Vercel. It's work that if you hadn't started with them, you would have had to do anyways. So I don't see using Vercel as locked in. I see using Vercel as choosing to not do a bunch of this type of bullshit work that isn't key to your application. If the hundreds of hours of setting up CDNs and cache layers is worth less to you than $10 a month, I don't know why you're watching this video. But for the rest of us devs making a living, that's a worthwhile trade. It's a lot scarier when your data is involved, though, so I understand the reservation here. If a startup is hosting your data in a cloud that you're paying for, and you only can access it through their SDK and their weird compiled layer that turns TypeScript into transactions that run on a database you have no access to, that feels a lot more locked in. But for some reason, Convex has decided to make it real easy to move off. It's trivial to sync your database to other places. You can just add a link to bind it somewhere else and copy the data over. You can rewrite the query code to do it however you want to instead. You can write your own custom version of the use query hook and just redefine all of that yourself. Or you can get what you're looking for, which is lowering your bill by self-hosting it, because it's all self-hostable and you just move your data over and be happy. Do I have to delete this folder when I move off of Convex? If I move off of Convex entirely, yes. But if I move off of their cloud, no, I can just host it myself. But all of the code I would be writing is the same code I would have written if I never used them in the first place. And I chose to do that. I chose to go the other way, where I wrote the code Convex provides for me, hated it, and chose to throw it all away in favor of letting Convex run things for us. And the result is that our bills are way cheaper. It's currently saving us about $800 a month on our Vercel bill, and with a change I just made, it'll save us another $500 soon. It's saving us $800 a month on our Planet Scale bill, and I think it costs us like $600 a month total. So we're saving $1,500+ and it costs us $600. So if your concern is cost at our scale, you're good. It handles it great. Hopefully that helps address the lock-in concern. Here's a fun question. If the infra is all open, how does Convex make enough money considering that they don't have as many enterprise contracts compared to other proprietary products? Great question. They're making a slightly different bet. They believe, and I now also believe, that if a startup comes around and chooses Convex as their solution to problems, and they're competing with a company that is using the more traditional enterprisey solutions, the company using Convex will ship way faster, hit product market fit way quicker, get there way cheaper, and be way more successful as a result. I know this because our competitors not using Convex are moving way slower than us and have a worse experience than us. Because of that, we can become more successful. And a lot of Convex's customers don't make them jack shit for money until 6+ months in. But if 1/100th of your customers 6 months in are now spending thousands of dollars a month, you're doing okay. And why would I ever try hosting these things myself, as easy as it is, when one of the best teams of infrastructure engineers in the world can do it all for us for a relatively cheap fee? It makes no sense in the world. Our bill for one of our model providers, just with fucking Anthropic alone, is $30,000 a month minimum. And our database for all of it, our sync engine for all of it, our layer for how all of our application works is $600 a month versus $30,000. I'm skeptical of how good it seems, and every time something's too good to be true, it bites me in the ass. I agree, but what's cool, this is the thing I had to click for me with Convex. It's not like this one big thing that takes over your app. It's all these little primitives, and all of these primitives are like super tightly well-designed, and then they compose really well too. Like React as a promise sounds insane and impossible, but hooks make sense, components make sense, lifecycle makes sense, the packages make sense, and then all of it comes together into this thing that works really well. Things like Convex components will be in the follow-up video I already mentioned I probably will do of all the little things I love about Convex because they're really, really cool. But I'm very, very happy with Convex. And I hope you guys see a bit of why I have fallen in love with it the way I have. And I hope that if you're similar to me and you saw it, and you're like, yeah, that seems fine, but it's not for the things I'm building. I am shipping real applications. I need more control. I'm scaling my apps. This is for little side projects. I was wrong about that for almost 4 years, and I hope I can prevent you from making the same mistake I did. These guys are legit. Don't miss out on what might just change the way you build entirely, because it did for me. Thank you guys for listening to this far too long rant. I hope I have properly communicated the value I get out of Convex. Let me know what y'all think, and until next time, peace nerds.